Okay guys, Will Levy from Melbourne Strength and Conditioning here. I'm going to show you today through a series that we use for hamstring strength, but specifically from the supine position. So this is part of the Fitball SHELC series. Right? SHELC is S-H-E-L-C, short for supine hip extension with leg curl. Now the reason why I like including these as part of a progression, particularly for both athletes, I train a lot of soccer athletes, and also for anybody coming back from a hamstring injury. What we see, and what's commonly prescribed by a lot of physiotherapists, is the Nordic curl exercise, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. Kind of like a glute ham raise, but generally the ankles are pinned in some way, either with a partner or even using the lat pull down machine in reverse. And that's often prescribed because there's a lot of literature behind that for its success with both hamstring rehabilitation, but also even hamstring injury, I won't say prevention, but hamstring injury reduction. A lot of very good quality research for that. So it's a very popular choice, and that's great. But what I've found with either regular personal training clients who aren't as strong as some of the athletes, or for somebody who's in that rehab category, they're generally not strong enough to go straight into that Nordic curl. So even though it's a great pattern, if what happens, their ankles are pinned, they start falling forward, and they only get a little bit into it. They barely move from the knees, and they start cramping up because it's just too much eccentric stress through the hamstring, and they don't really get much benefit out of the exercise because they can't really get any range of motion. So what I've sort of come up with, I guess, is this pre-gression leading up to the Nordic curl. So using the Fitball SHELCs, here's how we go about it. So phase one is just doing the straightforward double leg SHELC. Right, so what we do is get the feet fairly narrow on the ball. Right, you can see my heels are a little bit over the top of the ball. If we come too far back, the ball will just tend to slip away. So heels over the top, right? And the big focus here is on maintaining this full hip extension. So I want to make sure my hips are completely up. My glutes are on. It's like I'm holding the top of a glute bridge, but I want to keep a straight line all the way through. Now, even if I flex my hips a little bit, this really diminishes the effectiveness of the exercise. So that's the big coaching cue, is hips up and to constantly push them up. So the exercise is this. Right, I'll just show you a couple of reps. Okay, so what we want to see is that first movement from here. I'm locked out, and the very first thing is, even as I bring my feet in, the hips are going up as well. What we often tend to see is this. Right? The hips drop, or even if they stay relatively still in space, because the knees are lifting, that's still hip flexion. Right? So we don't want this. Right up to get that straight line. Glutes working hard, pushing right up into full hip extension. That's the whole key to this exercise. Right? So you feel the hamstrings are working pretty hard there. So what we tend to do here is just build up the volume. So generally I'll start clients off 3 to 4 sets. Starting might even be down at like 6 reps, depends how much their hamstrings can tolerate before they start cramping up. And we build it up, generally a rep each session, right? And what I like to do is see them get to 4 sets of 15. That tends to be a good number to go to our next progression. So if they can tolerate that and they're not cramping, get through a few sets. And by the way, we generally put these later in the program. So they've done their bigger lifts, movements where they're standing up, so squats, deadlifts, split squats, lunges, etc. These are usually later down, maybe like a 3A, 3B or a 4A, 4B sort of exercise. So they've got to their 15. Next stage. We now do a double leg concentric, single leg eccentric. So hips up, double leg concentric, lift a leg, maintain that hip extension, do the eccentric phase on one leg, return. Right, so you still see that, still got that focus on the hip extension, right, and maintain it the whole way through. So now we're making that transition to single leg strength. Right, so what we're doing is we're using 2 legs for the hardest part of the exercise, the concentric phase coming in, and then where we kind of got the momentum of the ball in the eccentric phase, we're a little bit stronger, we do that with a single leg. Generally start at maybe 5 reps a side, work up to 8, even 10 reps a side. Once they can do there, if they can do that much, we go to the next stage, which is pure single leg. So for the single leg, bring that foot more to the middle. You don't want to be where you would be for two leg because now you're really off to one side. So bring the working leg to the middle. Exactly the same principle. Get their hips high, lift one leg, but now we keep it off the ball the whole time. Right? And we're just focusing on that full hip extension. Right. So the cues for that is really is that focus on full hip extension. So if you're training your clients through this, really emphasize that. Sit beneath, sort of poke them in the butt cheek a little bit to lift them up. Kick them a little bit. Do whatever you need to do to keep those hips up high. We don't want to see those hips drop at all. Right, and that's going to put build a lot of concentric and some eccentric strength through that hamstring. The other great thing about them is because there's no stretch phase, right, we're not loading them up like it would be with, say, an RDL or a single leg RDL, which has a lot of eccentric stress. They tend to be something which can flare up somebody who's got perhaps a tendinosis condition. So this here being a mostly concentric to neutral movement, there generally isn't going to be any DOMs and there's not going to be any excessive stress for somebody with that tendinosis condition. Okay, and then once they can bang out those single leg SHELCs for a few sets of maybe 6 to 8, even 10 aside, they've generally got some pretty good hamstring strength. And that in its own will get them a long way. But also what we see is by the time we get them back to that Nordic curl, when we're falling forward, they can actually get a lot more range of motion out of it. They can fall forward, come back up, and then we can focus on getting them strong there and even getting bigger ranges of motion and loading that exercise up. So try that as a pre-gression, I guess we'll call it, to the Nordic curl. And that's something that can be progressed pretty rapidly. Potentially you get someone through in as short as maybe 2 weeks, going through those series, moving up the progression over a couple of days. Longest case, generally maybe 4 to 6 weeks. If someone who's a little bit further behind, maybe a rehab client or rehab patient, take them through all that to a single leg, then chuck on the Nordic curl. So try that one out, see how you go.